I'm sorry, I lost track of the question. No, I think it's mostly an issue for me of getting myself into the right frame of mind to get the work done, and I don't really need to, to leap into too much more stuff to do that.
Do you do things what do you do to take a break from writing, to get your mind fresh again?
A break from writing.
or is that just imaginary?
Really, I don't really take a break from writing, because if you're a writer, either you are writing a story, or you are thinking about writing a story, or you are thinking about a story that you've already written, and that's pretty much what you do. You might be doing some other stuff along with that. In order to get set up for writing, I like to get away from things for a while and play some video games and kill some people online. In the vein of I like torturing people.
Have you thought of starting a gamer tag collection just of your readers, so you can know you're killing them?
Oh, I had never really considered it.
Yeah.
Mostly because I'm like one of those hyper-competitive jerks online, and it's okay if I'm one more hyper-competitive jerk,
right,
talking smack at somebody across the internet, but if I would hate to be, oh, hey Jim, great, it's nice to see you. Yeah, die, scum. Let's see, I'll punish you for using that grenade launcher, noob.
Learn to play.
Yeah.
Adam wanted to know, he says authors constantly are working to tell stories in fresh ways, but we don't write in a vacuum. We're either inspired or influenced by what we've read. How do you take influence and inspiration from what you've read previously and keep the work original?
Oh, mostly I just steal things whole and slap a coat of paint over it and redo it. Really, telling original stories is something that happens when you tell a story. I mean, if we were all writing the same story, we took the same the same basic parts and said, okay, now write a novel. Your novel would come out very different from her novel, would come out very different from my novel, because we're very different people.
And you're a good writer.
Well, maybe. I mean, it's arguable. I would say I'm a good storyteller, not as much a good writer, but it would all come out very different because we're very different people, and we've had different life experiences, we have different focus of what is important to us in our lives. So really, I mean, if I want to write, I've got Jedi Knights in the Dresden Files. They happen to use knights, they happen to use holy swords instead of lightsabers, but come on, they're Jedi Knights, really. But they turn out very differently, have a very different feel, because I'm a very different person than George Lucas is.
Thank God.
But really, don't worry so much about running over somebody else's stuff. If you see something that inspires you, that makes you excited, that gets you emotionally involved in a story, grab it and start working with it. Figure out how to make it your own story just by telling the story yourself. Because your story is going to come out totally different than mine is. It's going to come out totally different than anybody else's.
Yeah, I mean, the Dresden Files are a good example. Detective stories have been told for a long time, but
yes,
but you were able to take it and take it in a whole new way.
Oh, wizard. Magic, yeah.
And I know we've asked you this before, but do you have any, and I know we have a ton of writers in our audience right now, what is your advice for writers who are either just getting started or trying to be published?
Oh, gosh, that's such a broad, open-ended question. Probably the most important thing is write. When you finish something, start something else. When you are sending something out to see if it gets sold, don't wait to see if it gets sold, start writing your next thing. Don't get stuck on the story on one story that you've written. Be focused on your next story. Get the next one done. One of the things that I do myself when I'm writing is when I get finished, as soon as I get done typing the end on the end of a manuscript, the first thing I do is open up a new file for a new book and type chapter 1 and try and get the first sentence of the new book down, because you can't get stuck in one spot. Don't get stuck rewriting the same book over and over and over again and thinking you're going to make it perfect. You don't want to write the perfect story. You want to write the next story.
Interesting. All right, so we have about a half an hour left over for questions. I think it would be easiest, because the room is so large, if we put the microphone over in this corner, and then people can line up if they want to ask a question.
So Andrew will go over
Andrew will be over here,
find
by the
Andrew,
speaker.
and just line up over here by the door.
And and we'll give you guys
Does that
a
give enough
second
room for the
to
line?
congregate. Yeah, that would be helpful in just making it a little more seamless, so we're not running around the room like crazy. I'm trying to help you, Andrew. Okay.
Mr. Butcher, I'm a huge fan of all your work. I've read almost everything you've published. By far my favorite is the Dresden series, and there's one thing about it that I find interesting. Harry seems to be a very chivalrous man who has a code of ethics with relation to women, and he upholds that very strongly. And in contrast to that, when you're writing these stories, there is a very physical way of describing women. Andy is always referred to as very large bosomed, and through, especially when you get to the White Court, it seems that women are described incredibly physically. And it always struck me as there's this huge contrast between Harry and the way women were described in the Dresden series.
I don't see the conflict. You can't be chivalrous and also notice a woman's beauty.
Well, you can, but also if every woman is beautiful.
Aww.
I thought there was more sentence coming there.
It seems like women are being objectified, and that's not what Harry would do, but it's how the books do.
Okay, if you say so.
I'm just asking.
It's your opinion, and I respect it. I don't agree with it. You know, Harry gives descriptions of things in physical terms. I mean, almost everybody gets described that way. Everybody gets descriptions of this is what they look like, this is what their hair color and eye color is. Harry describes people except for when he's noticing, oh, girl, boobs, hips, okay, which is what men do. But the point is he describes things in very physical terms so that he could turn around and say, this is what this person looks like to the cops, because that's kind of the way he thinks. And also, it's a result of it's a result of his early years in profession where he did do a lot of work. Where it's like, okay, I've got to be able to think in these terms. But as far as that goes, I don't think there's nearly so much. Noticing the physical attributes of somebody does not mean that you've lessened them as a person. If you think that I objectify women in the writing, that's another thing. I mean, and that's something I would also argue against. But again, that's going to be something that's going to be subject to interpretation from a lot of different folks.
Thank you.
Based on what everyone else is going to say about being a big fan, reading everything, just ditto. A lot of us got turned away from the fighting and writing thing last night because of fire code. The room filled up, and then there was like 20 or 30 people who came to the door.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
So for those of us who couldn't make it, I don't know if anyone else is here, what would be your advice to distill down writing an awesome fight scene?
The most important thing is to make sure that the action is clear, that you pay very close attention to the chain of stimulus and response and cause and effect that makes the fight happen. Try and break the fight down into a tennis match. Something that is that simple to follow, where you've got the camera following the ball. The same thing has to be true with your fight. Real fights aren't at all like that. Real fights are messy and they're clumsy and they're over very, very quickly. But when you're writing in a book, you've almost got to have that same sort of flow that you get from a tennis match.
What do you think the purpose of a fight scene is when you put it in? What are you trying to convey?
It depends on what you're trying to convey, really.
What are the kinds of things?
You do fights for dramatic effect. You do fights for comedic effect. You do fights to establish somebody's credibility in terms of what kind of threat they can represent to the story, or to establish who they are as a character. I mean, you can use them for all kinds of different things. And I'm a big believer in violence as a tool for all sorts of. There's an entire palette of violence out there, and you can paint great pictures with it.
The more you say that, the more I'm convinced that I don't want to hear about the Roman legion coming through the fence.
Exactly.
Scrap that idea.
I guess I should have coordinated with my boyfriend before we both came up here because I was about to ask you the same question. So I apologize if there's any overlap with him. I really don't want to take up your time answering the same question again. But just in no other book compared to the Dresden Files have I so often had those moments where I'm on the edge of my seat, or I stand up and cheer. You you have things like, zombie Sue, or, the entire ending of Changes. I guess my question is, as a writer, are there any craft tips you can give for how to convey that, sense of just overpowering emotion, being in the moment when writing?
Yeah. Pay attention to the things that make you feel emotionally overpowered. If you run into a piece of music that makes you feel a certain way, if you're at a movie and there's a portion of the movie that evokes very strong emotional response in you, if somebody's talking and they make you completely angry, pay attention to it. Go back and look at it if you can. Try and figure out why that stuff gets to you. And really that's okay, we're going to get all Greek here and I'm going to say know thyself. But in doing that, you get to understand yourself a little bit better, and you start to understand why these emotions get to you, and then that helps you in turn understand how to torture them, because that's what you're doing. Is the business of writing is, and this is a cold way to say it, and I rejected it completely when I first heard it from my writing teacher. But the business of writing is the business of manipulating people's emotions, and if you can get them to love who you want them to love and hate who you want them to hate, cheer when it's time to cheer and cry when it's time to cry, then you've got a great book going, and that's what it's for. So in order to do that, though, you have to understand what gets your own emotions going in that direction. And so that's why I say, if you've got something, pay attention to it. Try and get out and experience things. Sometimes go out sometime, kind of away from all the ambient city light, and sit down in the country somewhere and just wait for it to get dark by yourself in the woods. That's an experience. And it'll teach you something. And start figuring out how to do stuff like that, and how to get to yourself, and then you can get to everybody else too.
Thank you.
Very well.
Hey, I like to ask this of all the writers. It may be a little less pertinent since you write in so many diverse genres, but I found that most writers are also prolific readers when they're given the chance. What are some authors or books, like outside of genres that you're known for, that you're a big fan of?
Probably the biggest outside the genre would be Robert B. Parker, his Spencer books, and I love those. Let me think. I read a lot of military science fiction that I really enjoy. David Weber, John Ringo. I enjoy those guys a lot. Also over in science fiction, Lois Bujold is probably one of the most skilled writers alive.
Yes.
We just finished Curse of Chalion as our monthly pick last month. It's great.
Lois, as professionally speaking, I want to have her babies.
Elaborate on something.
Oh God, I wouldn't do that to her. But she seamlessly integrates a character and world and story into one piece better than any writer that I know, and can make you care about people better than any writer I know.
It's funny, one of the criticisms from our group about Curse of Chalion is one of the people felt there wasn't enough violence.
Not enough violence in Curse of Chalion.
We've been reading a lot of grimdark recently.
Right. That's true, because there really isn't. Now that I think about it, there's really not a lot. Tons of drama, but not tons of violence. Although I like Paladin of Souls a little bit better.
I just started it. Yeah, it's great.
Paladin of Souls is great. But anyway, does that help? Okay, good.
Do you get a lot of chance to read outside of?
I make a lot of chance to read.
Good.
I'm one of the writers who thinks that reading is part of my job. So I'm this week I've been rereading the whole Vorkosigan saga again.
Nice.
So it's like, I must have more Vorkosigan.
Okay, first off, from what the other gentleman said, ditto. I apologize if you've already covered this somewhere else, I just haven't seen it. But Michael and just the Knights, you briefly mentioned that they were more or less based off of Jedi, but that between them and your just portrayal of faith, what is your inspiration through them and Father Forhill? Because it's really good.
I was just sort of tired of the only Christians that ever appeared anywhere in books either being raving fanatics or raving hypocrites, because that was really kind of the only portrayals you ever saw of anybody that was involved in the Christian church, and I didn't dig that, and I wanted to write a paladin, and so I wrote Michael Carpenter in as a paladin the way I thought a paladin should be. So that's kind of where that came from.
Well, just as a Christian, thank you for someone that isn't a hypocrite thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Justin.
Hi, Jim.
How you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
I LARP with this guy, so we're cheating.
What steampunk LARPs he was talking about was one of them.
Yeah.
Actually, this is settling an argument between me and my brother.
Okay.
Tabby or Tobby?
Oh, Tabby or Tobby?
Tobby.
Tobby.
Okay.
Well, and
I apologize. I'll change it. Listen, we'll lie to him, okay? Right? Nobody tell his brother.
Thanks, man. And Codex will always be my favorite. It's why I don't read books over again. Like once I've read a book, I just kind of put it away, unless it's Tolkien or C.S. Lewis from my childhood. But I've read Codex 3 times now.
Wow. Oh, cool.
I absolutely love that series.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
All right.
do you feel like it's important for people to pronounce things from the book in a certain way? A lot of authors don't. They're like, well, I don't care. You
No,
can
I
pronounce
think it's
whatever
more
you want.
important they enjoy the book.
Yeah.
You know, so if you want to say Tabby, go ahead, go for it.
So you have permission from Jim Butcher.
Hi there, big fan.
Oh, thank you.
So the Dresden Files in particular typically have a really kind of fast start. You get the plot established really, really fast. They have a big epic finish. Can you talk a little bit about plotting and how you fill out your act 2?
How I fill out what?
Your second act.
Oh,
of the book.
yes, I can. Whenever I'm getting ready to write one of the Dresden Files, okay, you have to understand that when I was learning this stuff, I was not necessarily all that bright, and I'm not all that much smarter now. But when we talked about story arcs, the way I would plan out my story is I would start by drawing a big arc. And then I would put the beginning of the story at one end, and like the big showdown at the other end. And then at the high point of the arc in the middle, I'd come up with a big scene in the middle that would be kind of my big middle scene, which would be my big flashy special effects thing. You know, my escape from the Death Star scene. And then after that, I would just start filling out points in between. How do I get from here to there, and then how do I get from the top down to the end? With the idea being, when you're writing a story, you kind of want to start at your beginning, and you want to build up to that middle. And the middle, that's sort of like the part of the roller coaster where you're going jump, 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 jump up the hill. And then when you get to the big point in the middle, at that point, the rest of the story should be roller coaster going fast, so that you're not bogging the reader down after you get there. So really, I plan a big flashy bit in the middle. So whatever you can read all of my stories, you could probably go in and find them. But there's a middle event that sets into motion the entire series of events that follows the rest of it. And you know, after you get to the big middle, the rest of it should basically be thrill ride. You know, with a couple of little slow bits as you go around a corner and then hit another dip. But other than that, you know, it's I don't do complicated, man. It's just, you know, beginning, big middle, big showdown at the end.
Right on. Thanks.
No problem.
Is book 3 the middle of the entire series?
Is what?
Book 3 the middle of the entire series?
No, Changes was the middle of the entire series.
Oh.
Just so you know, so.
That's a big event. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the flashy.
Don't tell her.
Hey, no spoilers. Spoilers, Jim Butcher.
No, you too late. You've
Too
given up
late?
your spoiler card. Yeah, your don't spoil me card.
So I was there at the Fighting and Writing panel, and a lot of the other writers on there have some sort of fighting experience or training, and I was wondering if you do, and if you do a martial art, what is it?
I do a polyglot martial arts because I moved around from place to place for a long time. So I started off in Shorin-ryu, which I took as a kid and learned just a little bit, and then got beat up a lot. I got beat up a lot as a kid. I might have been a little bit mouthy. Then I started learning Ryukyu Kempo. After that, I took Taekwondo, I took some Aikido, I took some Kung Fu. I spent a lot of time in Gojo Shorin-ryu, a very down and dirty, practical street fighting variant of Gojo Shorin-ryu. There was a lot of stomp on the foot, kick in the knee, sort of martial arts going on there. I've also done considerable fencing, and then I do boffer weapon stuff, which is not actual martial arts, but it's great for footwork. And so, I mean, that's been my experience. I've actually have been in a couple of conflicts, nothing huge. I mean, in terms of I haven't ever had to fight off muggers for my car or something like that. But I've been in altercations and you know, they're at this point, it's just like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. It's ugly.